Dr. R. Hemavati is an assistant professor in mathematics in Queen Mary's, Chennai. She has specialized on functional analysis. Having 12 years of experience in teaching, she has won various awards for her performance. She has published papers in 14 international journals, 3 national journals, and has presented papers in 10 international and in 5 national conferences. She is also one of the editors for an international journal.
Welcome to UGC lecture series. In the previous sessions, we have dealt with random variables, and in the previous session also we have dealt with weak law of large numbers and weak law of large numbers for identically and independently distributed random variables. In this session, we are going to deal with strong law of large numbers, and associated with strong law of large numbers a lemma called Borel-Cantelli lemma, and its converse statement and proof will be studied. Some central limit theorems will be discussed, and applications of central limit theorem also will be discussed in this session. What is strong law of large numbers statement says? We say that the sequence x1, x2, x3 etc. up to xn etc. of random variable obeys the strong law of large numbers S, L, L, n with respect to the norming constants Bn. Bn is actually standing for variance of x1 plus x2 plus etc. plus xn. Since it normalizes, it is called norming constants Bn if there exists a sequence of centering constants An such that Bn inverse into Sn minus An tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, where Bn is norming constant and An is centering constant, Sn is a sum of partial sums of the sequence of random variables. Sn is equal to x1 plus x2 plus etc. plus xn, okay, where Bn is greater than 0 and Bn tends to infinity as n tends to infinity. Just compare with weak law of large numbers. Weak law of large numbers says probability of xi minus e of xi is less than n epsilon is greater than 1 minus eta, where epsilon and eta are such that Bn by n square tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. But here Bn tends to infinity as n tends to infinity. That is only basic difference between strong law of large numbers and weak law of large numbers. That is, the norming constant is becoming much and much stronger, tending to infinity, whereas in the weak law of large numbers Bn is becoming much and much weaker and it is tending to 0. That is the basic difference between strong law of large numbers and weak law of large numbers. Here one more point is discussed, that is Bn inverse into Sn minus An tends to 0 is mentioned. This convergence is almost sure convergence. What is meant by almost sure convergence means we say that x1, x2 etc. up to xn are almost surely convergent if p of omega, omega is an event such that xn of omega tends to x of omega as n tends to infinity is a sure probability, okay, and here we write that xn tends to x almost sure. Okay, that is, if a probability value of an event is equal to 1, we say that that event is called a sure event. So here the convergence, if it xn of omega tends to x of omega, if its probability is 1, that type of convergence is called almost sure convergence. Such convergence is taken in strong law of large numbers. Bn inverse Sn minus An tends to 0 in almost sure convergence. Next, associated with the strong law of large numbers, this very important theorem is Borel-Cantelli lemma, which is also called 0-1 law. We shall see what it goes as. Let a1, a2, a3 etc. up to x infinity be a sequence of events. When you talk about random variables, the representation should be in terms of x, x1 etc. When you talk about events, you should change the notation, that is a1, a2, a3 etc. up to infinity be a sequence of events on the probability space S, B and P. What does this? S stands for sample space, B stands for Borel field associated with the events, and P stands for probability space associated with the events. And let A is equal to upper limit of an. Upper limit of an says like intersection n is equal to 1 to infinity, union m is equal to 1 n to infinity an. Okay. If you have summation n is equal to 1 to infinity, P of an is convergent, then P of A is equal to 0. That is, if you take A as upper limit of an is intersection and union together. Intersection is n is equal to 1 to infinity, infinite intersection, and this is also a partially infinite, union m is equal to n to infinity an. If summation n is equal to 1 to infinity, P of an is convergent, is less than infinity means it is convergent, then P of A is equal to 0. How does the proof goes? First you take A. What is A given as? A is equal to upper limit of an. This is given, which is equal to intersection n is equal to 1 to infinity, union m is equal to n to infinity A, union n is equal to m to infinity an. So intersection is infinite, we have the notation A is contained in union n is equal to m to infinity an. Okay. So then when you take the probability on subspaces, we have P of A is less than or equal to P of union n is equal to m to infinity an, and this being mutually independent, you have this is equal to summation n is equal to m to infinity P of an, and also it is given summation n is equal to 1 to infinity P of an is convergent. This summation n is equal to m to infinity being the partial sums or the reminders of the infinite, this also is convergent. Okay. It means that summation n is equal to m to infinity P of an tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. Okay. So what happens? P of A is equal to summation n is equal to m to infinity P of an. This tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. So we have P of A is equal to 0. This is Borel-Cantelli lemma, which is called 0-1 law. I will say why it is called 0-1 law after seeing the converse. What does the converse states? Borel-Cantelli lemma 0-1 law converse states as if A1, A2 etc. up to An is a sequence of independent, that independency was not there in the original statement of Borel-Cantelli lemma. Independent events on the probability space S, B, P. S stands for sample space, B stands for Borel field, and P stands for probability space. And let A is equal to the same thing, limit, upper limit An is first intersection n is equal to 1 to infinity, union m is equal to n to infinity am. If summation n is equal to 1 to infinity P of an is equal to infinity, then we have P of A is equal to 1. In the previous case, you just see the ultimate result was P of A is equal to 0. In the converse, you are having P of A is equal to 1. So Borel-Cantelli lemma is talking about the probability of a sequence of events where ultimate probability values are either 0 or 1. That is why it is called as a 0-1 law. Now let us see how the proof goes. Taking in the usual notation, the proof says that an closure is the complement of an in the space S minus an. We have for m comma n, where m is greater than n, such that intersection k is equal to n to infinity a k bar, that is complement, is contained in k is equal to part intersections k is equal to n to m a k bar. Taking probabilities, probability of subspaces is correspondingly will change to less than or equal to a k bar is less than or equal to p of intersection k is equal to n to m a k bar. And this being independent events, when AIs are independent, then AI bar also will be independent. That is one of the results known to us. So being independent, we will have this is equal to multiple product k is equal to n to m p of a k bar. Okay, what is equal to? This is multiple product k is equal to n to m 1 minus p of a k. What is this equal to? When you product, it is starts from n to m, right? Therefore 1 minus p of a n into 1 minus p of a n plus 1, m is greater than n, right? n plus 1 and p of 1 minus p of a n plus 2 etc. being product, it is like that, 1 minus p of a n into 1 minus p of a n plus 1 etc. It goes 1 minus, ultimately you will have p of 1 minus a m. Okay, and this is equal to a product of their exponential, which is less than or equal to product of k is equal to n to m e power minus p of a k. Okay, product of the expectations, you have the power, therefore you will have summation minus k is equal to, what will happen when you multiply p of a n into p of minus p e power minus p of a n plus 1 etc. e power minus p of a m. When you product, the corresponding powers has to be added, therefore you will have this expression e power minus k summation k is equal to n to m p of a k. Okay, and it is given, what is given? Summation n is equal to 1 to infinity p of a n is equal to infinity, and this being the partial sums also will tend to infinity. Therefore we will have, therefore summation k is equal to n to m p of a k will tend to infinity as m tends to infinity. So what happens? What is there on the left hand side? The left hand side we have taken k is equal to n to infinity p of a k closure. Okay, therefore p of intersection n k is equal to n to infinity a k bar is equal to e power minus infinity as n tends to infinity. I have taken this part as infinity is less than or equal to, right? E power minus infinity, e power minus infinity is 0. So that is you have p of intersection k is equal to n to infinity a k bar tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. When it tends to 0, we have this particular part is 0. Now next we will take a. What is a? A is known, limit, upper limit a n is intersection n is equal to 1 to infinity, then union m is equal to n to infinity a m, right? From this what is a bar? Using the De Moivre's theorem, a bar will be, intersection will become union and union will become intersection when you take the complement, right? So union n is equal to 1 to infinity, intersection m is equal to n to infinity a m. Okay, then p of a bar is equal to p of union n is equal to 1 to infinity intersection m is equal to n to infinity am. This is union will become summation when you take it outside because they are all independent events. Summation n is equal to 1 to infinity p of intersection m is equal to n to infinity closure, sorry, am closure. Applying this p of intersection k is equal to n to infinity a k bar tends to 0, here we have this tends to 0 as n tends to infinity. Okay. Therefore, p of a bar tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, which implies 1 minus p of a tends to 0 as n tends to infinity, which implies p of a will tend to 1 as n tends to infinity. Hence, the converse of Borel cantilever lemma is proved. After studying the weak law of large numbers and strong law of large numbers, we will go ahead with studying some limit theorems. What is the limit theorem states? Central limit theorem. There are two different central limit theorems. Both of them means the same thing here as such. If xi I is equal to 1, 2, etc. up to n, that is if x1, x2, etc. up to xn are independent random variables such that E of xi is equal to mu I and V of xi is equal to sigma I square. Then under certain very general conditions, the random variable Sn is the sum of partial sums, x1 plus x2 plus etc. xn is asymptotically normal with mean mu and standard deviation sigma, where mu is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n mu I and sigma square is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n sigma I square. That is, Sn is following, it states Sn follows normal distribution with mean mu and standard deviation sigma. If it follows normal distribution, it means it is having the properties of a normal distribution. Okay. What is De Moivre's Laplace theorem states? If xi is equal to 1 with probability p and if xi is equal to 0 with probability q, then 1 with probability 0 means this is nothing but like Bernoulli's type of distribution. Then the distribution of the random variables Sn is equal to x1 plus x2 plus etc. plus xn, where xi's are independent, is asymptotically normal as n tends to infinity. Let us see the proof of De Moivre's Laplace theorem. We have to prove that Sn follows a normal distribution with mean mu and variance sigma square, is asymptotically normal. It follows a standard normal distribution. Okay, we shall start the proof. We can say that a particular random variables follows a distribution means the corresponding MGFs should be equal. The corresponding MGF are equal means then we can use the uniqueness theorem and say that the corresponding random variables follows the same distribution. That is why how we can prove a particular random variable is following a particular distribution. Okay, how does it go? So, first of all, let me take about the moment generating function of each random variable x1 of t. Moment generating function of x1 of t is e power t x1 is equal to, what is this x1? This is summation e power t x1 into p of x1, and it is having the probability p when if it takes the value 1. So, this is equal to e power t into 1 into p plus e power t into 0 into q. So, this is p e power t plus q. What happens to Sn? Sn of t is equal to p of x1 plus x2 plus xn of t. Using the additive property of a moment generating function, this is equal to m x1 of t into m x2 of t etc. m xn of t. Moment generating function of sum of random variables is equal to product of their respective moment generating functions, and all the xi's are identically distributed, their moment generating function will be equal. So, we have p e power t into q, p e power t plus q etc. p e power t plus q. How many times that p e power t plus q is repeated? It is nothing but n times. So, whole power n. This is m Sn of t. What is this? This moment generating function looks like the binomial distribution's moment generating function. So, by uniqueness theorem we can say that Sn follows a binomial distribution with parameter n and p. Okay. So, then what happens? What is E of Sn? Expectation of Sn is mean of binomial distribution, which is equal to np, and variance of Sn is equal to np cube, which is the mean and variance of binomial distribution. Okay. Then what happens? Z, you take about Z, right? Sn minus expectation of Sn by root of V of Sn is equal to Sn minus mu by sigma. Okay. Mu is here, where mu is equal to np and sigma is equal to root of npq. We will talk about the moment generating function of z, that is Sn minus mu by sigma of t is equal to, using the shifting theorem of moment generating functions, we have e power minus mu t by sigma m Sn of t by sigma, where just now we have found m Sn of t is equal to q plus p e power t whole power n. We just found out. Okay. So, what happens to mz of t? Substitute e power minus mu t by sigma q plus p e power, in the place of t you are having t by sigma whole power n. Okay. And substitute for mu, sigma, etc. You will have e power minus np t by root of npq q plus p e power t by root of npq whole power n. Okay. And this can be simplified as 1 plus t square by 2n plus order of n power minus 3 by 2 whole power n. And as n tends to infinity, order of n power minus 3 by 2 tends to 0. So, as n tends to infinity, we will have m z of t tends to 1 plus t square by 2n whole power n. Okay. As n tends to infinity, this particular expression tends to e power t square by 2. This e power t square by 2 is the MGF of standard normal distribution. Okay. From this association, what can we say? mz of t is now the MGF of standard normal distribution. So, we can say that z is equal to Sn minus mu by sigma is asymptotically asymptotically means it is normal at n tends to infinity. Okay. It is normal, following normal distribution with mean 0 and standard deviation 1. Okay. This is standard normal distribution. Hence, we have just proved Sn is asymptotically normal with mean mu and sigma, standard deviation sigma. Hence, we have proved the De Moivre's Laplace theorem. Next, this is a central limit theorem. There are two forms, one is Lindbergh-Levy theorem, another one is Lyapunov form. Okay. This Lindbergh-Levy theorem states if x1, x2, etc. up to xn are independent and identically distributed random variables with E of xi is equal to mu I and variance of xi is equal to sigma I square, I is equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. up to n, then the sum Sn. All central limit theorems deals with Sn only. Sn is sum of partial sums. x1 plus x2 plus etc. up to xn is asymptotically normal with mean mu is equal to n mu I and variance sigma square is equal to n sigma I square. Then this is one of the applications of central limit theorem, that is, if x1, x2, etc. are IID, independently and identically distributed random variables, all are following binomial distribution with parameter r and p, then Sn is equal to x1 plus x2 plus etc. xn, then E of Sn is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n E of xi is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n E of xi. Just we have found out the mean of binomial distribution is np. In the place of n you are having r, therefore rp. Rp is added n times, therefore nrp. Similarly, variance. Variance of Sn is V of summation I is equal to 1 to n xi is equal to variance of xi, n times variance of xi, which is equal to summation I is equal to 1 to n, variance of xi is rpq. So, nrpq, where q is equal to 1 minus p, and ultimately what does it we say that when you take the limits of Sn following a normal distribution between a and b, we have it is with the corresponding characteristic functions pi of b minus pi of a 0 less than p less than 1. If yn is binomial variate with parameters n and p, then p of a less than or equal to yn minus np square root of np into 1 minus q less than or equal to b is equal to pi of b minus pi of a for 0 less than p less than 1. This is one of the central limit theorem, that is, if x1, x2, etc. up to xn are independently and identically distributed random variables with E of xi is equal to mu I and variance of xi is equal to sigma I square, I is equal to 1 2 3 etc. up to n, then the sum, partial sum Sn is equal to x1 plus etc. xn is asymptotically normal with mean mu is equal to n mu I and variance sigma square is equal to n sigma I square. That is, this Sn is also following a normal distribution with mean n into mu I and variance n into sigma I square. Now, as an application of central limit theorem, one problem is discussed here, that is, if x1, x2, etc. up to xn are IID, identically independently distributed Poisson variates with parameter lambda, use central limit theorem to estimate a probability p of 120 less than or equal to Sn less than or equal to 160, where Sn is a partial sums and the parameter lambda for Poisson distribution is given to be equal to 2 and n is given to be equal to 75 random variables. That is, here it is given xi is following Poisson distribution with parameter lambda. Then we have to find the mean and variance for Sn. Sn is x1 plus x2 etc. up to xn. E of Sn is n into E of xi is equal to n lambda. Substituting n and lambda values is 150. For Poisson distribution, mean and variance are same as lambda. So, E of Sn is n lambda and variance of Sn is also equal to n into variance of xi. This is also lambda, n into lambda, this is also equal to 150. So, Sn follows a normal distribution with mu and sigma, implies Z can be written as Sn minus mu by sigma, that is Sn minus E of Sn by variance of Sn. We have just found mean and variance of the partial sums. Sn minus E of Sn by root of V of Sn is equal to Sn minus 150 by root of 150. Now, we want the probability of 120 less than or equal to Sn less than or equal to 160. So, that 120 and 160 has to be converted for Z values. So, 120 minus 150 by root of 150 less than or equal to Z less than or equal to 160 minus 150 by root of 150. The calculation gives you value minus 2.45 less than or equal to Z less than or equal to 0.82. Plot these points on the normal distribution curve, minus 2.45 on left hand side of Z and 0.82 on the right hand side. So, we want the area between minus 2.45 to 0.82, where your normal distribution values tells you the value from Z is equal to 0. Area being symmetrical, the area from 0 to 2.45 in normal distribution table gives you 0.4929 and the area from 0 to 0.82 gives you 0.2939. Added together, we get the total area as 0.7868. In this session, we have dealt with the strong law of large numbers, and associated with strong law of large numbers, we have seen Borel, Cantelli lemma, its proof and the converse proof. Also, some central limit theorems are discussed. de Moivre's Laplace theorem statement and the proof was discussed, and one problem is worked out in central limit theorem as an application of central limit theorem. Thank you.